She's been to war. Now her business is making sure your MRI reaches your doctor and your kid's birthday's on the calendar. Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. I'm your host Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women who are paving bold paths. This week's guest is Lizzy Livne, founder and CEO of Quiet Lux. She fought her way into the IDF as an American combat soldier. Here were not so great, shoes not the right size. After October 7th, she came back as a reservist. Now she runs Quietlux, a personal life management service where real humans handle everything quietly piling up in the background so you can focus on what actually matters. Let's dive in. Oh, and hit follow and subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming. Lizzy, welcome to the TrailBLAZER Pod. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. So I want to start a little bit differently with you. I don't know. I'm feeling a vibe. I always start with childhood, but I want to start with like today. If you had to explain who's Lizzy without saying what you do, what would you say?
So funny because I don't actually know that I would incorporate what I do into who I am.
Oh, I love that.
I think though, and I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this, I recently moved back to the US, New York City specifically, a year ago. I had spent the previous 6 or 7 years living in Tel Aviv, and I think it's a very like New York thing. When you you network, it's always like, who are you? What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And I find the more Middle Eastern way is like, do I like you enough to do business with you? Like, can we shoot the shit and then figure out how to like negotiate this term sheet?
Yes.
So I think I would think of myself as like fiercely independent, values driven, caring, very empathetic. I think as an entrepreneur, my work, it has become my identity in many ways, but I think in my mind, it's not, if that makes sense. Like if you ask other people what I do all the time, it's work, but I also very much value like those other aspects of myself.
It's a good distinction. It's so funny that you say that because I actually asked this question because of that. Because so many of us in the US were trained to answer that question with our job. And I agree with you. In Europe or in other countries, culturally, it's more like they talk about their family or their spouse or what they did yesterday for fun, and it's a very different type of answer based on the culture. But it's funny that you recognize that about yourself. It's cool. So I'm glad I started that way.
Yeah, I had to turn it off when I moved to Israel originally, and I had been working at Morgan Stanley, and kind of that's like a very like, it's kind of like I would say like exactly what we're talking about.
Yes.
Then you move to Israel, like nobody wants to be that girl's friend, like, and that's like that ends up having poor commercial value because you do business with your friends at the end of the day.
Right.
The people you trust their perspective. Here it's like you have your work friends, and then you have those friends, and you have your contacts, and then there it just was all one big thing.
Yeah, it's like not integrated the same way here, and it's like a big theme on my podcast is women learning to integrate all different parts of themselves, and I guess it goes even beyond the individual. It's like culturally we're not doing that, so I feel like we can have a whole conversation
for sure.
Okay, so let's now take it back to what were you like as a young child? What was life for you growing up?
So funny, I actually think I've always been exactly the same, and like per my parents and per my sister who were there, they will always, I don't know if you've ever seen like the meme, I don't even know if meme is the right term anymore, but it's like a Labrador retriever with its leash in its mouth walking itself. That is how my family has always described me, just like obviously when I was a child it was like me trying to like make it up a stair on my own, and like I just wasn't accepting help. I was just going to figure it out.
Wow.
And I think that like as I've grown and evolved, like obviously those examples have changed. Like everything has always been hard for me. I was not a great student. I've always had a really good attitude about not being particularly great at anything, which I think has actually ironically gotten me further than the actual grades. But I think that has very much come from just like a trial and error. Like, okay, I can't get up the stair this way. I'll get up the other way. There's like many pictures of me when I was 5, like balancing on my abs because I was too short to be able to brush my teeth. So I would just jump, balance on my abs, brush my teeth. And then like there's different physical iterations of that as I got older. And then it became like the more intellectual challenges. Yeah, I was just always kind of like, it's just fine. I'll just figure it out. And I think that mentality of it's just fine, I'll just figure it out has really, really been true to who I am. Always. And I think at this point, it's like in my DNA.
It's literally like the word I'm thinking about is resilience. Sounds like you've had that from birth almost. But I feel like sometimes our personalities are morphed by the feedback we're getting, like the feedback loop from our parents.
Did they notice this and like let you? Did they once tell you, you can, it's okay that you messed up or you're not good at something? Or was it literally just something you have naturally and like it has nothing to do with anybody else?
So funny because like I can answer this from their perspective, which is like try to tell me what to do and see how it goes. Um, but I think they always wanted to just let me exist in the world for myself. And I think in many ways, like that is the biggest gift I was given. And I think the way I think about it as like, obviously fast forward 20, 30 years is, I think the best gift they've given me is the ability to know that I can try and fail and like everything is okay. My family still loves me. They still value me. It doesn't actually change their perspective on me. And I think that has always been true. I remember I used to like come home with whatever grade. If it was always over a 90, I was super proud of myself. And my parents would always ask me, well, did you try?
Mm.
And I would say, well, what do you mean? I got a 90, whatever. And they would say, if you didn't try, it doesn't really matter that you got a 90
Wow.
something. So it was always about kind of like the process versus the outcome and making sure that the process was a 10 out of 10 versus like the outcome, which obviously, and I have a lot of gripes with kind of the school system and everything being out of 100% because just like life doesn't work out that way.
Right.
Not sure when the last time you felt like you got an 100 on any like life object is, but I think the whole concept of controlling what you can control the inputs, like become an expert at your craft, like all that comes from the process of how you do it. Like everything else is out of my control.
Wow. It's amazing that your parents and your family fostered that type of learning. And I feel like, talking about entrepreneurship and founders is such a key muscle that we need to have.
1,000%.
So it's really cool that that was basically your childhood, the messages you were receiving so early on. I think it's so beautiful. Speaking of, you were saying you weren't good at school, or in your words, you weren't very great at anything. I'd love to understand that more, but we'll talk about it later on. When you were in high school, what did you envision post high school? Did you want to go to college? Did you have a dream career? What was Lizzie's mind then?
All I thought about was joining the Israel Defense Forces.
Okay, so you already knew that then.
Lifelong dream. Came
Wow.
up with it when I was 12. First time I was in Israel, saw a soldier, asked my parents about it. That was it. It was all I wanted to do.
Wow.
My parents, who sent me to Jewish school, were like, "What do you mean you're going to the Israeli army? What are you going to do that for? You're American." So I did end up going to university. I went to Northeastern, and it's funny because and in many ways I was never great at anything, but like when I had to figure out how to do my degree in 2.5 years, like negotiate with every senior stakeholder at Northeastern who was telling me I couldn't because it was too big of a risk, blah blah blah. I was just like, it's all fine. I'm just gonna get it done, and I did. And I graduated with some form of honors. I forget which one, but like I was like, not so shabby for something that they were like, no, you can't do it. You're gonna start failing classes. I think the IDF was like the main thing, and I wanted to be a combat soldier. I kind of wanted to, I've always been mission driven. I like to think of like my circle in like Venn diagrams, or sorry, rather concentric circles. And like it's kind of like me, maybe it sounds selfish when you admit it out loud, but like it's me and my husband, me and like my family,
Yes.
and then you go out and like then it becomes like, okay, my friends, then my community, and like the question I think me and my family, whether childhood or my more recent one of my husband, we asked ourselves is like, how are we showing up in each of those circles, right? And on different
Right.
days and different parts of our lives, it's different. But this community element, this mission-driven element, this element of being Jewish, I've always been hugely, hugely proud of. I grew up in one of the most Jewish parts of America and still dealt with anti-Semitism. I was actually surprised post October 7th when people like didn't know it existed. I was like, oh, you guys just never, like if you didn't know it existed, you just weren't involved in a Jewish community that actually showed you were Jewish somehow.
Interesting.
I remember in high school there was an instance of, I think it was like a boys baseball game, a pair like varsity. We weren't like, we played in the public school league, but we weren't competing for like college spots, Not to say that would justify the comments, but like it's kind of like, okay, maybe I could get there if you thought this was like a legitimate form of trash talking.
Right.
A parent came and screamed that Hitler was right. That was like
Oh my gosh.
2010. We had examples of like, I played varsity soccer again, and we played with all the public school kids. Just like crazy anti-Semitic stuff. We always won the games where there was anti-Semitic stuff, which was like a little like spooky and eerie. But
Was it motivation to prove him wrong, maybe?
I almost feel like, and I know it's getting a little religious and spiritual, but like I almost feel like it was a force from above because it was just like this
Mm.
crazy thing that like suddenly we were beating these teams. Some of them we would beat on a regular day, but again, this isn't the most Jewish part of America where like there's
Right.
a strong, robust Jewish community. We're all proud Jews, and so just and I know I'm ranting, but just to go back to the original question, like this was like so ingrained in me that like the way to give back is time. It's to like fully commit yourself, which I did, and I still feel like I gave more than I gave. And I really, I served from 2013 to 2015. There was an
Wow.
operation then. I fought my way into reserves post October 7th. So in many ways, I also feel like I gave everything I
Mm.
could, and I still took away.
Wow. I'm just processing. The
No.
rant was a good rant. It's a good rant. So thank you for ranting. When, you said that I've always moved a little bit off the expected path. So when I saw you said this, it really resonated with me. But what did you mean when you said it? Like, why do you feel internally that you've always just didn't really necessarily stay on the path that was expected of you or the way other people were doing it?
I don't think I knew at the time. I think a lot of these concepts are like assigned later in life when you reflect
Mm.
back. And I think at the time, like I was a really happy kid. I was a really happy high schooler. I was like no, I wasn't rewarded for my grades or anything. But when the teacher had to get up and give a speech at high school graduation, he mentioned my like fiercely
Mm.
positive attitude. And it's just something that I've carried my whole life. So I think I just didn't like really pay attention one way or the other to what other people were doing. I think I was just thinking about what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And as an example, like not a lot of Jews at that time. So I graduated high school in 2011. Not a lot of there wasn't a massive Jewish community at Northeastern in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my peer group would go to like Wisconsin, University of Miami, Syracuse, University of
Right.
Pennsylvania, if you could get in there, Cornell. Like there was kind of like a group of 10 schools that like the Jewish community was going to. And I just wanted to see what else was out there. I came back, right? But I wanted to see like what does that mean to
Right.
step out of the Jewish community for a bit. And I actually had a lot of anti-Semitism at school at the time. So then you're kind of like,
Wow.
okay, maybe I went too far.
Mm.
But I think a lot of that is in the learning, and that anti-Semitism furthered kind of the idea I had that I wanted to join the army. And I wasn't trying to do something different. I just had a fierce belief about what was right for me. And I knew
Wow.
you aged out of being a combat soldier. And I was like, I'm not taking the risk of like not becoming a combat soldier. If I'm like giving up on
Right.
everything in the US to like follow this dream and then like you don't get the thing you want. So I literally dropped out of school, took military leave, and was like, I'm just doing this because it makes the most sense to me. But it's one of those things that like didn't make sense to anyone else, but I didn't really think about that
Mm-hmm.
didn't make sense to them. And
Yeah.
I think now in hindsight, when I'm like piecing it together, it's like, okay, I've always done things a little bit in my own way.
Right.
But at the time, I just had a very specific view. And I think that has another thing that's always been true about me. I have really strong point of views. I'm frequently wrong, right? But just because I'm wrong to the like you might think I'm wrong, but it might still be the right thing for myself.
Right.
You know
Such
what
a
I
good
mean?
point. Such a good point. It's also, when I asked you the first question, you described yourself as independent, and I think a lot of us think independent means your first example of I like to do things on my own, but it's also independent thoughts and not being distracted by the noise and not feeling like you have to do things the way everyone's doing, right? It's not just like, don't help me brush my teeth. Did you ever though feel like the noise was maybe did you ever feel like you needed to fit a mold in some capacity or that never happened to you?
No, not that it comes to
Oh.
mind. I just never focused on it. Like I was always so like captivated by what I was doing. And I think like none of these are small things, right? Like if you're working at Morgan Stanley, you've got to be all in there. If
Yeah.
you're, in the military, you got to be all in there, especially doing what I was doing. Like I think I've done a lot of things which have been all in. And I think a lot of the space comes from for noise comes from when you have capacity to like consider other things. And so I've
Mm,
never felt like I've even had like the excess bandwidth to consider alternative
that
options.
makes
Same thing
sense.
being a founder, by the way. Like this is going to work because it's going to fucking work. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to make it work,
Yeah.
right?
Well
And
said.
like you want to start asking me about how this that like I have ideas, I have thoughts, but at the end of the day, everything's a hypothesis, a thesis, a bet, an investment, whatever word we're using, and you just have to believe that you have the right infrastructure to make it happen. And I think
Yeah.
the gift in many ways of kind of always being like off the derech or whatever we're calling it is like I've made that decision many times over, which is like, can you just bet on yourself, your strategy, and let time do its thing?
Yeah.
And I know I can.
I love how you reframe. You're really good at reframing things for me, and I'm sure for the rest of the
Oh, I'm
audience.
so
Like,
glad.
yeah, like that. You don't have time when you're focusing on yourself. You don't have time to. You don't have the capacity and the bandwidth to start thinking about what's the mold that's expected from me. It's like if you're busy. The saying, very famous saying, if you're busy watering your grass, you won't notice that there's greener grass across the street or something like that, right? Messing it up, but that concept.
Yeah,
But I've never
exactly
heard
that.
it applied in this way. So you're talking about founder and investment and all the things. I want to get into some questions that by you answering, I think we're going to give advice to the audience. So we're just going to have a conversation, but I think it's going to be very helpful. You've said that, and again, I'm quoting you. So if I'm looking this way, I failed enough times that it doesn't scare me anymore.
Correct.
Such a common thing that founders go through, right? We're constantly failing. We can fail multiple times throughout the day. We have highs, we have lows. We constantly pivoting. Can you remember the first time failure really impacted you? Like, is there one time that actually is like sticking with you? What did you take away from it that now you built that muscle memory to be able to handle it?
Yeah, actually, I was in the army. There were not a lot of women in my unit at the time. I was always like one of two in like the broader space. Women have like different times and metrics for a few things, but the one thing is we still have to do all the physical tests. One of the physical tests that was incredibly difficult for me was an obstacle course. And I was like one of the like rare Americans that fights their way into commander's course. Usually your Hebrew's not good enough. And one of my commanders was like, you're going and we're going to figure out this Hebrew piece. And we sat every day and we worked on my Hebrew. So I finally got to go. And I almost didn't pass commander's course because I couldn't get up the stupid 3-meter rope. And I had the technique. I had the strength. I was in shape at that time. I could not do it today. Like I had such a mental block because somebody had mentioned, I think in like basic training, that this was a thing that's just hard for women sometimes. And I couldn't break that. And so every day I would go and I just had this thing in my head. And again, it's like, and it's been a lesson to myself, right? Which is like, I do monitor what I actually take in. I monitor what I prevent scroll time. I do a lot of this stuff to like protect my brain in many ways. Because that limitation was a mental limitation, not a physical one. And I almost didn't pass commander's course because of it. I passed it the last possible second after like everyone else had already gone on to either officer's course or been assigned roles. And I was not any stronger. I was not any faster. I just worked on my mental ability to overcome this obstacle. And that was it. And from that day on, I could do it like it was no problem. I could do it upside down. I could do it sideways. Like it was no problem. But like that was a really, really hard one for me. I also really hate publicly failing, which I think as a founder is really important to talk about because I think there's this idea of like people always congratulate you on your successes while perhaps not paying attention to the failures or while perhaps because they don't like everyone's busy, everyone's involved in their own life, right? So like it's very kind that they congratulate you, but then it's kind of like, man, the things I had to do to get to this like to this success point. And like the second you get there, you're already focused on the next 10 successes, right? Like that's just life. But anytime I've had to do something publicly that didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, that is always learning for me. And also it never turns out the way you want it to. There's like thresholds of like, is it good enough? But it's never going to be one for one what you had in your mind.
Right. It's so scary when it's public because now you have, like we were saying before, a feedback loop. You're having people literally witnessing you fail. When you fail silently, you're just dealing with your own voices. As someone that, has been in leadership and, entrepreneur and founder, what would you say, like, how does someone know when to walk away from something that failed or didn't work out versus staying and just keep it like maybe next time, maybe this time it'll work. Maybe if I put in another, year into it'll work. It's like, how do you know when to separate it and like close that door?
So I actually leaned on one of my favorite writers on this topic is Annie Duke. She wrote a book called Quit, which is really depressing to read like day one of opening your startup, but probably really necessary. And the opening example she gives of her book is there's two parallel stories. One story is somebody climbs Mount Everest. They say that if it gets below a certain degree, they're going to turn around. They get there, it gets below a certain degree, they turn around. We never hear about those guys again.
Right.
The next story is the guy who says he's going to turn around if it gets below a certain degree, and he keeps going and he dies. And that's the guy we hear about.
Right.
And so in many ways, it's like this like perseverance story is always the story we tell, but like the whole, that sets up the book for like, at what cost?
Right.
And so what I really liked about her framework is this idea of you have to make a decision before you get there. Like, it is not a game day decision. It is a thought out like metric that you have in your mind. I can say that when I also got this advice from a senior, actually female investor in the Israeli ecosystem. She pulled me aside when I said I was going to start a company. And she said, Lizzy, no one else is going to tell you this, and no one else did. Make sure you're sitting down with your husband and talking about your personal runway. Make sure you're sitting down with your husband and talking about at what point you're looking for a job. And make sure you're sitting down and talking like through what your next life stages are with your husband now. Do not wait for all these things to unfold. Like, get ahead of it. And I did. And me and my husband outlined, like, if I didn't hit 6 figures in revenue year one, I was going to look for a job. But then I hit 6 figures of revenue in year one. And then it became along the way, like, what I've learned. And the next part of the conversation, as we were talking about it, kind of doing like a 1 year, like, retrospective analysis, for lack of a better term, was he was like, Lizzy, you will not do anything else. Like, this is, I see how you are when you work on this. Like, this is, you're going to just figure this out. And that's how I feel about it. And that's like, it is my everything in so many ways. But I think it's like, it's a lot of the unsexy conversations that I think people don't want to admit that they have or want to perhaps like sweep under the rug. But I don't know how we would have navigated like the ups and downs of last year if we wouldn't have had those conversations.
Yeah, it's because, when you have an idea as a founder, you're so excited about it in the early stages. It's almost like, you're like creating, almost like, I always say, like, startups are like babies, right? From inception to toddler to wherever it goes. And you don't want to think about, what could potentially happen that's not going to go the way you want to. You want to think about the exciting parts. You want to think about creating a team, this technology, whatever. And it's very hard to do what you did. And it's amazing that you got that advice from that woman. And now we have you to give advice to people listening. But it's very hard to go, and it almost like puts this like gloom over this new thing that you're doing. And like not many people want to do that. So I think like hearing, for you, it was that woman or mentor or whatever you want, investor, you called her investor. And for listeners, it's people like you, which is why I have the podcast, to be like, it's not pretty, it's not fun, but this is going to save you so much pain down the line, proactively figuring this out. Great advice.
I think so much of life is really the unsexy conversations. And even, by the way, even in my own business, when people ask me like about my business model and all that, I always say we do the unsexy parts of life, right? Like we obviously do vacations and private jets and whatever, but the majority of what we're doing is figuring out why your MRI didn't get to your doctor, or figuring out why Ryanair didn't, sorry, call them out, but like didn't refund you even though they said they would, or why your couch didn't show up. Like I have an endless list of unsexy things. And I think that like there almost needs to be a mental like shift around what unsexy is and what sexy is, because at the end of the day, a lot of what is the perceived unsexy like elevates the sexy, makes the sexy better. Like my husband comes with me to work events and helps me market Quiet Lux, and like we go on the gala circuit together, and like it's all because this is part of like our family mission now, right? And I think that like nobody does anything alone, and I think that's true from like I credit my employees, they work their butts off, they are incredible people, my investors, you just don't do it alone. And I think that's also the unsexy thing,
right?
But it elevates the sexy, right? At the end of the day, which is like, in order to get where you want to go, you need the people, you need the team, you need the conversations. And like, I think there is an element of like romance and sexiness in that, but I know that's a very, very unique perspective.
Yes, I think so too. You're not wrong. That's funny. Yeah. You mentioned, you're kind of alluding to Quietlux, but let's talk about it. What is Quietlux? Who'd you build it for? Give us the elevator pitch.
Sure. So Quietlux is a text and email-based platform where we manage your personal life. So you drop in anything, and I gave a few examples, to your text message or email stream with us, and then you have real humans going to take care of it. We have a few beliefs and underlying theses to the business. One is that as the world has become more chaotic and more tech driven, it's actually become more complicated and difficult to manage. And that is why we will always have humans in the loop. And the second is that we are a luxury experience and we are a luxury service, and our clientele gets treated as such, right? It is all about quality. We have a 92% accuracy rate when it comes to solving problems. Obviously, everybody wants to have 100, but just to give you some other metrics, AI for personal life is somewhere in like the 30% range. If you queried like a 60K per year personal assistant, they would be probably within this like 55 to 60% range. So I am really, really proud of this 92%. And that is the blend of the human and the tech. And our secret sauce has been that we are obsessed with the quality, which means we know when to slow down, not just when to speed up. And that we are professional problem solvers. At the end of the day, anything that touches your personal life is on the table for us.
I love the name. Did you come up with it?
Thank you so much. Yes, I did.
It's a very, very cool name. When you started versus where you're at now, and you're still early on in the journey, but when you started versus now, did the idea of what support looks like change? Did you think it was one thing, and then as you started having clients, notice that it might be something else?
Not on the support side, but almost on every other part of the business. Like when I initially started market research, it was more of a milestone manager, meaning like weddings, like moving apartments, like kids, like just as you had these milestones, you needed more support around those transitions. And then it became obvious, I did like 300 market research interviews. It became obvious that the real pain point is really this like day-to-day like catch-all. Because again, as the market's evolved, not just in the tech side, but also kind of in this, like, we're in like such a world of governance right now. Everybody says no. Everyone's like, oh, sorry, that's out of scope. Oh, sorry, that's out of scope. Right. And so just being the company, we're like, yeah, sure, it's in scope. Like, sure, send it over. It's in scope. Like that brings so much joy. And frequently it's something that we have to like find a partner to solve, but we have built out such a robust network of problem solvers, concierge partners. So really, like anything that our clientele needs, whether it is a discount at like a high-end furniture company, or it's a private jet, or it's figuring out where to have their 10-year-old's birthday party in Manhattan, or it's just somebody to have a second pair of eyes on like a flight schedule because they feel like they're going to go crazy if they look at it anymore. Like that is all stuff that we do.
Wow. As a founder, you're wearing many hats. Like, do you find that there's one part of so many hats? Do you find that there's one part that, gets you the most excited?
I'll tell you what gets me the least excited, and that is...
Let's start there.
Yeah, that is company admin. So I started this company because this is my own problem. I'm actually not good at admin. This is like the
You're the client.
I'm a disaster. Like any fine you could get in your first year of owning a company, I pretty much got. Yeah. By the way, also as you're starting and like incorporating, just make a mental note of that, because I was like, what am I getting fined for? Why do you need all my money?
Oh my gosh.
But what I really, really love, I do really love the strategy, the marketing, the PR, the sales. I'm still leading all of our sales and intend to for quite some time. I really love the customers and the clients. We are so fortunate to work with really incredible people and people I just really admire what it takes to lead a life that they actually want to live. And you see that there are trade-offs, and you see that they're fine with the trade-offs, and they're just, there are trade-offs in life, and like moving right along. Like it really motivates me.
So cool. I love talking to founders and hearing that part, because it's just like the passion that founders have about what they're creating. You can see it in their face. It's like different than the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is like, this is what we do, and this is who we're for. And then you ask like the question that I just asked you, and you can see, your face light up, and like you can feel the warmth.
It's fun. It's fun, right? Like I think the creativity, like I think I had perceived creativity to be like arts and movies, and like I always say that like I'm a business creative. Like I spent a year in hospitality, like just studying hospitality business and just studying fashion and luxury to understand like how an ecosystem works and like what I could bring from there into Quietlux. I don't want Quietlux to be positioned as a tech company. We are a luxury experience company, right? It is all about the customer. It's all about creating this world for them where problems just get solved. And I think it's cool when you get to take different parts of like different industries, like what relates, pull it all together. Like whether it's getting inspiration from like Amy Poehler's podcast or Acquired podcast. Like there's like a huge range there, but I love them both.
You're for someone that's so you've accomplished so much and you've done some really serious things in your life. You're very funny.
Thank
You're
you
a
so
funny
much.
person. Yeah.
You know,
I'm
I
laughing a
credit.
lot.
I'm so grateful that you said that. It's funny. I actually feel like since moving back, people don't have such a sense of humor, and I feel like what gets you through a lot of the tough times in Israel is just being able to laugh.
Yeah.
Like
They do talk about the Jewish humor almost because we've been through so much. You have to be able to laugh at yourself, right?
for sure. Like you can't take yourself too seriously. There's serious stuff happening.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm really like cheeks are hurting.
I'm so glad.
Okay, back to serious stuff. So now we're talking Quiet Lux. We're talking what it is today. But when you started out and you started a Substack, you were talking about how you were scared people were going to say you're a fraud
For
and
sure.
that you were unqualified. Well,
Yeah.
me looking at your background, I wouldn't think that, but I understand. We all go through we have those voices in our head. What did being a fraud when you were thinking this, writing this? What did that look like in your mind?
I think I was always waiting for somebody to tell me it was a bad idea or I couldn't do it, which is crazy because like people don't say that. So like it was a crazy thought, and then it wasn't something I discussed so openly. It was just a thought I had. I had always wanted to start something. I just thought it might be later in my life. And then once I decided to do it, everyone was like, oh, it's great that you're doing it now. You never would have wanted to do it later. Like life doesn't work out that way. Like life gets more serious as you get older. Like this is the time.
Right. Would you call that imposter syndrome, what you had?
Maybe. Imposter syndrome, fear. I definitely identify it as fear. And you just have to like work your way through it to the other side. I always call things tunnels, and like it's like a fear tunnel. You just gotta like get through it to the other side. And you do. In terms of imposter syndrome, I think there were elements of it. I think I had more imposter syndrome when it's like the first 6 months you start your company, people ask you what you do, and you're like like there's like, and again, maybe something people don't talk about as much. Like it takes you a while to get your elevator pitch down. It takes you a while to like have the right elevator pitch if I'm talking to you versus if I'm talking to an investor versus if I'm talking to a friend versus how you say it socially when you don't just want to talk about work, you still want people to be engaged, right? Like you really need like 6 different versions. And I think like day one of being an entrepreneur, you're so excited about your idea. Like you only say it in like the most robotic way.
Right.
And then like you like ebb and flow with it a bit over time. So I definitely had more imposter syndrome with that.
Interesting. What advice would you give to somebody who's, let's say you, when you were thinking, I'm scared people are going to think I'm a fraud, between that period and actually starting? Like you're saying it's a tunnel, get through it, but what's maybe some actionable advice that somebody can take to just, get through it, like you're saying?
It's not great advice, but it is just to keep going. Like, I think it's that emotions are emotions. They're there to protect you. And I think understanding yourself and why you are behaving in a certain way or why you feel a certain way is the most powerful thing you can do in any part of your life or in any career. So I think just understanding that like fear is fear. We're all scared at different parts of our life, but it's a question of like, what do you do with that fear? Does that fear deserve a place in your like mind, or is it just a feeling that you have to just like navigate through? And so I think that navigation looks different for everyone. I think for me, when I get scared, I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then I try not to think too much about this, like the outcome or making a bigger deal than it is, or like, but what if, or like one foot in front of the other. What's my next action? What's my next action? What's my next action? And then over time, you're like, oh, I was scared of that. That wasn't so bad.
Yeah, it's similar to I'm an EMT, so medical example. Like when somebody gets anxious, they get anxious about being anxious, and eventually they're hyperventilating. And it's like if you only just were like, "Oh, I'm anxious," just take a deep breath, your body would regulate much quicker. And what happens when you get anxious and hyperventilate? Your body's not getting oxygen. You're like and it's just ruminating on that feeling. So it's that's what I heard when you said that, just in a different.
No, for sure. I'm glad that like now it's like medically back though. It feels cooler.
You're welcome. I'm kidding. So bringing it back to your military experience, because military, besides for what you were saying, you had this mission, you wanted to go to Israel, your Jewish connection. It's also you were in a leadership position, and some of the guests that I've had on that were Americans serving in the IDF, or even just Israelis serving in the IDF, ended up in like amazing leadership positions, and I find it's really cool correlation that I'm noticing. How do you think serving impacted the way you operate as a leader right now?
I mean, I think it impacted every element of my being in the world. I think there's nothing as intense, nothing as, and Israelis will always underplay it. And like, if they're listening to this, they're like laughing at me, but like everything from like moving across the world with people you don't know to showing up like, and then breaking it down into these components. Cause I think sometimes we like think about like, oh, join the army, and you forget that it's like moving across the world, showing up, not speaking any Hebrew, and having people just yell at you for 14 hours and like I didn't have the right size shoes in the army for a year because I didn't realize that you had to fight at the time in the army to get what you want. So during commander's course, I actually pulled the bottoms of my soles out to make enough room for my foot. And then I ended up like injuring my knees. And then at some point, my commander at the time was like, why didn't you just ask for another size? And I was like, well, I've been trying. And he was like, okay. And then I finally got new shoes. So I think there's that element of it. And then I think there's the like bigger, like, I've been active duty in 2 wars, and in reserves, I was basically told you can sign this NDA and leave your phone in the other room and we'll tell you what you're going to do, but then you have to do it, or you cannot sign up. I hadn't touched any equipment for 10 years. I was totally untrained. My Hebrew wasn't as good as it used to be. And I was like, sign me up, I'm ready. And so I think it's a lot of these elements of like knowing yourself, making decisions, like playing the hand you have, which is like there's 1,000 more ideal situations in any given situation, but like I'm not analyzing those. I'm always analyzing like the 3 most relevant decisions I have to make and like the relevant parts of those decisions, right? Because like not, and I'll just use an example from like outside military that I find helps in this is like, how many friends do we all have that say like, oh, I'm debating leaving this job and it like pays them well. They've been there for a while. What I always say to the friend is like, great, go get another job. And then let's talk about it. Like, what are we talking about? If you want to go into a market where you may not get a job, you may not get a job at the like conditions that you want, and like you don't have enough actual input to make that decision. You're just like thinking about things now. Does not make me the most popular friend to come to when it comes to talking about job problems. Perhaps a little too pragmatic, but I think a lot of that comes from the military, right? Which is like, you'll figure it out, you'll make it fun, which, by the way, I think that's equally as important of a point. Like, I was on the northern border of Lebanon, or of Israel with Lebanon, with 4 guys I didn't know well, and my commander, who I actually was in the army with. Hilarious. Really, truly hilarious. Like, very core memories. Also terrifying, right? At the same time, but like, the laughter really created, and it was also their credit, right? Like they were just being like boys, and boys of a certain age are just funny.
And yours, because you're clearly as well. I think you got to give yourself
Well, I
credit
think
too.
I've just been like, oh, like somebody. You're also so much older than them at some point, where you're like, oh, I didn't think about this when I was like 20 going in, but I was going to be like 31 with boys that age. But they're great. They're really great and lovely. So I think a lot of that, like control, like what you can control. Make the best decision with the information you have.
Yeah.
Make a quick decision and move on to the best you can, and like have fun while you're doing it. I think those are all like really core military lessons. And also trust your people.
Right.
Which is huge as well, right? Like I want to hire people I fully trust. Right. I want to hire and aspire constantly to be a better leader and manager.
In between, being, I'm trying to find the right way to say this. Seeing what's happening, right? Meaning we're not given the same opportunities still. We're still getting less funding in VCs. So, and how we're perceived, but at the same time, not being victims in those areas, right? It's like about...
Also terrifying, right? At the same time, but like... The laughter really created, and it was also their credit, right? Like they were just being like boys, and boys of a certain age are just funny.
And yours, because you're clearly as well. I think you got to give yourself
credit. Well, I think I've just been like, oh, like somebody. You're also so much older than them at some point, where you're like, oh, I didn't think about this when I was like 20 going in, but I was going to be like 31 with boys that age. But they're great. They're really great and lovely. So I think a lot of that, like, control like what you can control, make the best decision with the information you have. Make a quick decision and move on to the best you can, and like have fun while you're doing it. I think those are all like really core military lessons. And also trust your people.
Right.
Which is huge as well, right? Like I want to hire people I fully trust. I want to hire and aspire constantly be a better leader or manager. I do not want to micromanage.
Right.
And I want everybody to feel good about the job they're doing, because we're a team, and it impacts, like, we're a small team too, so it impacts all of us.
Yeah. There's so much, that we can go into regarding, trust and teams and co-founders, and, I have one, and, hiring people that are better than you and not taking it as an ego hit. We can do a whole episode about that, but it's a huge part. What I want to ask you to end off is, as a woman in business, as a woman that has a podcast for women, specifically Jewish women, I'm always in between seeing what's happening, right? Meaning we're not given the same opportunities still. We're still getting less funding in VCs. So, and how we're perceived, but at the same time, not being victims in those areas, right? It's like a balance. So when I ask this question, I want to be careful with that balance. As a woman who has a business, how do you balance decisiveness with empathy as a leader?
Yeah, I feel like you're gonna hate me if I give my answer, but
I won't hate you.
I don't.
Say it how it is.
Yeah, I don't think about it.
Okay.
Like, I think and it's such an interesting point, because I actually don't think of myself as like a woman in business per se. I just think of myself as a founder.
Yeah.
I have been in many roles where I have frequently been the only woman in the room. It's never bothered me. I've had to figure out how to best execute, which is always the name of the game, right? Like, do you blame the room, or do you figure out how you're going to execute? I think we have more control, and we're better. I actually think we're better off. Like, I'm not going to be a tech bro, right? I'm not a tech bro. I didn't want to pitch to funds who were only looking for tech bros.
Right.
I don't want to go where the cards are stacked against me. I want to go where the cards are stacked in my favor. So I had a very specific list of funds I reach out to when I was raising. And it wasn't huge. When it comes to being a manager and being a leader, I think it's a strength. Like, I don't think about if they're mad at me, if they're this. Like, if I have to say what I have to say to get the thing done, then I have to say it in that way. But I care a lot about, like, and I monitor and I observe when an employee is getting burnt out. Like, and I always encourage them to, like, hey, I see this is happening. Like, you do need to take time off. Like, I think I just show up in other ways that have proved to be more impactful than, like, if I sound like an asshole in my Slack message, which for what it's worth, I frequently do. I hate exclamation points. I don't know why the world is, like, cracked down on, like, thousands of exclamation points. But I'm just focused on, like, getting the thing done in the best way possible, the most effective way possible, and perhaps, like, reserving the empathy for other parts of, like, the employee's life or the partner's life, which is, like, silly example. Actually, it's not silly at all, but perhaps not as discussed. Making sure your vendors are paid on time. Making sure, and this happened to me 2 weeks ago, I switched banks, my payroll failed. I canceled every single meeting that day to make sure that every single one of my employees, vendors, they're all getting paid, because at the end of the day, I'll pitch the mission and company and everything about Quietlux all you want, but, like, people need to feel that they are getting paid on time. That is, like, baseline trust. And I started asking other founders about it, and, like, there was this general perception that it's, like, unsexy to care so much about these things. And I, like, called someone, I was like, what do you mean it's unsexy? This is like baseline internal governance. And I think, just to come back to your question, like, how you balance empathy and other parts of leadership, is, like, that is where I am, like, canceling meetings, canceling everything, making sure that my team is taken care of. I also fire fast, as an example. Yeah. So, again, learned experience. I used to not do that, and now I know to do that. Might seem tough, hard-assed, whatever. What I actually want is, if you are part of the team, you know you are good, and you know you are excellent, and you know you are not just here because it's going to be a headache to fill your role. You're here because we are competing to win, and we are going to win, and, like, you are part of that team. Yeah. And I think that's another way to perhaps frame it. I don't know if I, like, totally answered your question, but those are just, like, a few examples of how I think about it.
You did, and you kind of explained it in the same way you were saying that you don't have space or capacity for the noise. Like, you're actually, it's not that you're not having empathy, you're just putting it in places that are actually more important, versus being tied up with the noise of, did I say that? Am I nice? Am I perceived as nice? Right? But the reason I like to ask this question is because I know I have listeners that are reading stuff and listening to stuff and internalizing it, and, like, haven't yet figured out a way to tune out the noise. And this is why it's important. I think it's important for young women to hear this, but you absolutely answered the question, and I think in a very similar way you answered the other ones.
I think what's challenging when you're starting off in the workforce is you don't actually know what you don't know, and you don't know how many things your boss is doing, and like you're not thinking about like their stakeholders. You're not like thinking about any of that.
Right.
And so I always like suggest most people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are.
Yeah.
And I think that is like such like a hard truth.
Yeah.
And again, back to the victim thing, like, is it like my fault, or am I a startup who I have to make people think about me, right? And so I just think when you're like coming up in the workforce, like, especially if you have a good working relationship with somebody, just like keep moving on. They probably didn't mean anything if they didn't use an exclamation point and they use a period, or they're between 15 things, or like I've heard all these things, right? These are like true examples from my life. Or like if you give a really short answer, like my examples, I'm usually between 15 things and just trying to get an answer like through, so I'm not the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's like, oh, she said these 3 words. What does she mean? And I'm like, literally whatever the 3 words say. What it says, that's what I mean. So I just think also just keeping that in mind and thinking about that, like, just like thinking about more of the system as opposed to the individual, when I think we're also focused to think about the individual, like helps relieve a little bit of that. It also gives like hopefully some comfort. We're like, okay, you misspelled something. Like, okay, if your investment banking bad, right, somebody's gonna be mad, but they'll also call you out on it and be like, you misspelled this, and you'll be like, oops, okay, I won't do that again.
Yeah.
So just again, another rant, but I think
we love your rants.
I think there's like freedom with it, right? I think there's so much freedom when you're like, actually most people mean well, or like, I know that one person's an asshole, but they're always an asshole, so it's also always okay, you know?
Yeah. I think a lot of this conversation was you reframing things for us, which is very helpful. It's always important to hear somebody. But I do have to say again, I don't remember the last time I've learned so much while laughing so much. So I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time, and I'm so excited to see where Quietlux goes and where you go and following your journey. Thank you so much, Lizzy.
Me too, Faye. So great to meet you.